I want you to picture yourself on a cold morning in the middle of January. The snow is halfway up the fence posts and the wind is coming down off the ridge, and you are standing at the back door in your coat looking out at a little plastic greenhouse you put up last fall. You spent good money on it. You ran the extension cords across the wet grass, you plugged in the space heater, you hung the heat lamp, and every single night that whole winter you laid awake, listening to the wind, and wondering if the power would hold, wondering if the plastic would tear, wondering if you would walk out in the morning and find every tender thing you planted turned black and dead, and some mornings you did. You did everything the man at the big box store told you to do, and the winter beat you anyway. I want you to hear me say this plain, because it is the most important thing I will tell you today. That failure was not your fault. It was not your dedication, and it was not your green thumb. You were sold a fight you could not win. And the folks who sold you that flimsy plastic tent and that string of heaters and that stack of monthly electric bills, they knew you could not win it. They were counting on it. Because a man who wins the fight against winter one time never comes back to buy another heater. Now I want you to sit with this. There is a way to grow a fig tree, or a lemon, or a whole bed of greens, right through the dead of a northern winter, with no heater, no extension cord, no lamp, and no power at all. And the whole of it, the entire structure, cost me about $30. Not $3,000. $30. The man with the greenhouse catalog will show you a heated glass house for $8,000, and the propane company will happily sell you a tank to keep it warm, and between the two of them, they will take $500 to $1,000 out of your pocket every winter you keep it going. And the thing I am going to show you takes that number down to about $30 one time and near nothing after. That is not a small difference. That is the difference between fighting the winter and forgetting it is even there. My name is Eli Lapp. I am Amish, and I farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And I am going to be honest with you the way I always am, because honesty is the only thing that makes a video like this one worth the minutes you are giving me. My people came over from the old country a long time ago and settled this ground, and my grandfather grew things that had no business growing this far north, and he never once owned a heater. He understood something that most folks have plumb forgotten, and I am going to hand it to you today the same way it was handed to me. Now, before I go one step further, I will tell you plain. I gathered all of this, the pit and the food storage and the dozen little ways my family keeps a home going without leaning on the grid, into a book. It is over at elilapp.com if you ever want it, and I will not bring it up again in this video, so you can forget I said it and just listen. And while I am being honest with you, let me calibrate that $30 number before you get too excited, because a title is a title, and the truth always has some edges on it. $30 is what the lid cost me, the glass on top. It is true, and it is honest, but it does not count the sweat. This project asks for your back, and a shovel, and an afternoon or two of real digging. If you have a bad back or rocky ground, that is a cost too, and I will not pretend it is not. So when I say $30, I mean $30 and some honest work. That is the fair version of it. And I will tell you one more honest thing while we are here. This is not some secret, my grandfather whispered to me in the barn. Folks have been digging pits to grow food for a very long time, in the old world and the new, and a fellow can read about them under fancy names in a library. I did not invent it. I just dug one and paid attention. And I am going to tell you what the digging taught me that the catalogs leave out. Now let me tell you what is really going on, because once you see the simple sense of it, everything after makes plain sense. The mistake almost everybody makes is that they try to fight the winter in the air, up on the surface, where the weather is at its most violent. You build a little house on top of the frozen ground, and you wrap it in a thin skin of plastic, and now your plants have nothing between them, and a 10 below zero night but that thin skin. It is like pitching a tent inside a walk-in freezer and then paying to run a hairdryer all night to keep warm. The cold is on all sides of you, above you, and pressing in through the walls. You have to buy back every single degree of heat with money and electricity, and the minute the power quits, the cold comes right back in. That is not a system. That is a constant emergency, and you are the one on call every night. Now here is the thing the surface hides from you. The ground under your feet is not cold. The top of it freezes, sure, but that frozen crust is just the skin. Dig down past it, past what we call the frost line, usually 3 to 4 feet deep in most of this country, and the soil down there sits at about 50 degrees all year round. 50 degrees in July and 50 degrees in January, blizzard or heat wave up above, it does not care. The earth is a great big battery, and it charges up all summer long from the sun beating down on it. And it holds that warmth deep down, long after the snow has fallen. Most folks walk across that battery every day of their lives and never once think to plug into it. So here is the whole idea, plain as I can say it. Instead of building up into the cold air, you dig down into the warm earth. You sink your growing space 3 or 4 feet into the ground, so the walls and the floor of it are that steady 50-degree soil. Now the earth is not your enemy anymore. It is your furnace. Those soil walls soak up the sun's heat through the glass all day, and then when the sun goes down and the cold comes, they let that warmth back out slow into the pit, the very same way the stones around an old hearth keep giving off heat for hours after the fire has burned down to coals. You are not asking the sun to do all the heavy lifting from 10 below. You are starting from 50 degrees and just asking the sun to top off the tank. That is a whole different job. The engineers and the fancy folk have long names for this, thermal mass and ground coupling and the like, but my grandfather just called it digging where it is warm. You might hear this thing called a pit greenhouse, or a sunken cold frame, or a wallapini in some circles. The name does not matter one bit. The physics is what matters, and the physics does not read catalogs and does not send you a bill. And here is the best part of the whole business. The main building material, the thing that does 90% of the work, is completely free. It is the dirt you already own. When I tell folks I built a place to grow tropical fruit for $30, they figure I must have scrounged a pile of lumber or dragged home somebody's trash. But no, 90% of this structure is just the hole itself. The hole is the greenhouse. The $30 went to the lid, the glass that lets the light in, and everything else is geometry and sweat. No concrete footings, no pressure-treated lumber for walls, no heating system to break down and beg you for money. Once it is dug, it just sits there, quiet, and does its work simply by existing. So let me give you the parts list first, with the prices the way I always do, so you know exactly what you are getting into before you lift the shovel. The hole itself is free. It is your own dirt. A shovel and a good digging bar, and if the ground is hard, a mattock. You likely have those in the shed already, but call it $40 if you have to buy one. The glazing, the lid, is the real cost, and this is where the $30 lives. An old sliding glass door or a shower door, and I will tell you where to find those cheap in a minute. Runs about $5 a sheet at a salvage store, and free if you catch one on the curb. If you cannot find glass, a sheet of twin-wall polycarbonate is the one thing I would buy new, and that will run you $30 to $60 for a sheet, depending on the size. Then a few heavy stones or a couple of sandbags to weigh the edges down, a bag of coarse gravel for the drainage, call it $5 to $10, and some old wool blankets or scrap foam board for the night cover, which you can get for nothing if you look. So all told, if you scavenge the glass, you are at $30 and change. If you buy the polycarbonate new, call it $70. Either way, it is one time, not every winter. Now we pick up the shovel, and I will tell it slow, because this is the longest part, and the part where folks either get it right or waste a whole autumn. But the good news is you only ever have to do this once. You are not building a temporary thing. You are landscaping a permanent feature into your land. First, do not try to build a cathedral your first time out. I want you to start with a footprint of 4 feet by 8 feet, and there is a reason for that exact size. Standard sheets of glazing, old sliding doors, polycarbonate sheets, they tend to come in those dimensions. You build the hole to fit the lid you found, not the other way around. Measure your glass first, then dig. Second, dig down at least 3 to 4 feet. This is the one thing I will not let you cheat on. If you stop at 2 feet, you are still up in the freeze zone, and the whole system fails, and you will blame me and you will be wrong, because I told you right here. You have to get the floor of that pit down into the stable 50-degree earth we talked about. Deep is the whole secret. Deep is where the warmth lives. Third, and here is the part most folks get wrong, so mind me close. As you dig, do not haul that dirt away. Do not spread it out. You pile every shovelful of it up along the north side of your hole and pack it down into a bank, what the old folks call a berm. That berm does 2 jobs at once. It blocks the cold north wind that comes down in winter, and it raises the back wall of your pit up higher than the front. You want the north side high and the south side low, so the whole lid sits on a slope tilted down toward the south. That dirt you are sweating over is not spoil to get rid of. It is your insulation and your wind wall, free of charge, and if you cart it off, you will be sorry. Fourth, before you plant a single living thing, you check your drainage, and this is the step that ruins more beginners than any other. If you just dig a hole in heavy clay, you have not built a greenhouse, you have built a bathtub. The autumn rains come and it fills up with water and your roots drown and rot and all that work is gone. So here is how you test it, the way I do it. Dig a little test hole down in the bottom of your pit, maybe a foot deep, and fill it with water. If it drains away within an hour, your ground drains fine and you are clear. If that water is still sitting there after an hour, you have a drainage problem and you fix it now, not later. You dig a sump pit in the center of the floor, about 2 feet deeper than the rest, and you fill it with that coarse gravel that gives the water somewhere to go while it works its way out slow. It is a boring step, and I know you want to skip it and get to the planting, but if you skip it, the whole system fails, and I would rather bore you today than lie to you. Fifth, now you put the lid on, and this is the trap part. And there is a right way and a wasteful way. Do not run out and buy new double-pane greenhouse glass. If you do that, you have thrown away the whole point of this before you even started. You want to scavenge. The best thing I have found is old sliding glass doors or shower doors. Folks throw these away by the hundreds. I found mine at a Habitat for Humanity resale store for $5 a sheet, and I have seen them sitting at the curb on trash day plenty of times. They are tempered, they are tough, and they let light through just fine. If you truly cannot find glass, twin-wall polycarbonate is the only thing worth buying new, and even then you can often get offcuts and scraps cheap from a construction job. But here is the thing about that lid that the catalogs never tell you, and it is the difference between a pit that works and a pit that just sits there cold. It is not about slapping a window over the hole. It is about the angle. The winter sun is lazy. It never climbs high. It drags itself low across the southern sky all day long. Now, if you lay your glass down flat over the hole like a skylight, that low winter sun hits the flat glass at a shallow angle and bounces right off of it, and hardly any light gets down to your plants. You want the light to go in, not glance off, so you tilt the glazing toward the south. This is exactly why we piled that berm up on the north side. You rest the high edge of your frame up on that berm and the low edge down at ground level. And now your glass is on a steep slope facing the southern sun. You are aiming to catch the noon sun square in the dead of December. You do not need a protractor or a degree in mathematics. Just go out at lunchtime in the middle of winter, look at where the sun sits low in the south, and aim your glass straight at it. It usually ends up being a good steep pitch, around 45 degrees, or steeper, depending on how far north you live. That steep angle does two good things. It funnels the light deep into the pit to hit the back wall and the floor where the warmth gets stored, and it sheds the snow so a heavy fall slides right off instead of blocking your light and crushing your glass. And the last detail on the lid is the seal. You can have the finest glass at the perfect angle, but if the wind can whistle in underneath the frame, you will lose all your stored heat in an hour. So where the frame meets the earth, you weigh it down tight with heavy stones or sandbags all along the edges. It does not have to be pretty. It just has to be airtight. When you lay that glass down and seal it, you have finished the trap. The sun goes in, it hits the dark soil at the bottom, it turns into heat, and the earth and the glass hold that heat captive. Now, before I tell you the last piece, the part about keeping it alive through the night and what to plant, let me pause for just a moment, because there are folks watching who are past the reading part and into the doing part. If you want to lower your bills, waste less, grow more of your own, and lean less on the truck that brings food to the store, my wife and I run a little community of plain living folks who help each other do exactly that. You can ask me and her your questions whenever you get stuck on one of these projects, and the link for it is down in the description. That is all. Now let me get back to the pit, because the next part is where most people lose the whole thing. The sun is your engine in the daytime, but the night is where you win or lose the war. And I need to say the safety word plainly here too, because a pit in the ground is not a thing to be careless around. So hear me on both. First, the heat. Here is a brutal little fact about glass and polycarbonate. They are terrible at holding heat. They are built to let light through, not to keep warmth in. An old single-pane window has almost no insulating value at all. So the moment the sun dips below the horizon, all that warmth you trapped in the soil wants to rush straight back out through the glass into the freezing night sky. If you leave that lid bare, the physics work against you, and by dawn the inside of your pit is nearly as cold as the air outside, and you will have a frozen lemon tree and a wasted winter. So you have to tuck the system in every single night. That is the chore. Every evening as the light fades, I carry out a stack of insulation and I lay it right over the glass. Old wool blankets, sheets of scrap foam board, even bags of dry leaves will do. You put a heavy warm lid over the glass to trap the heat rising up out of the earth, and then I throw a tarp over the whole thing to keep the wet off. It takes me 2 minutes. That little 2-minute chore is the whole difference between a hard freeze inside and a cozy 50 degrees. The earth gives its warmth back slow all night, and the blanket keeps it right there where the roots need it. Now the safety word plainly, because this matters, and I will not gloss it. A pit 3 or 4 feet deep is a hole in the ground, and a hole in the ground is a hazard, especially to children and to livestock. A child or a lamb or a dog can fall into an open pit and be hurt, and on a bright still day a covered pit can build up heat and stale air fast. So you mind 3 things. 1. You never leave that pit uncovered and unattended where a little one can wander, and you make the family know it is there. 2. When you climb down into it to tend your plants on a sunny day, you prop the lid full open first and let the air move, because a small closed space in the sun gets hot and close in a hurry. 3. You build the edges of your pit solid so the walls do not cave in on you while you are down in it working. especially in loose or sandy ground where you may need to shore the sides up with a board. This is a warm and gentle thing once it is built right, but it is a hole, and a hole asks for respect. I would want a body to be straight with me about that, so I am being straight with you. And there is one more danger in a pit, and it surprises folks. And it is not the cold, it is the heat. I know that sounds like foolishness in January, but a bright sunny winter day can cook your plants dead in that little glass box. If the sun is blazing and the outside air is 20 degrees, the inside of that sealed pit can climb to 90 or 100 degrees easy. That kind of swing stresses a plant, something awful. It wakes it up when it ought to be sleeping through the winter, or it scorches the leaves outright. So on those bright, clear days, you have to be the thermostat. You crack the lid, prop the glass, open an inch or two, and let the extra heat vent out. You are trying to hold a steady, boring middle. Cool enough that the plants stay dormant or barely creeping along, warm enough that they never freeze. It becomes a rhythm, a daily chore that ties you to the weather. You prop it open with your morning coffee. You close it down before supper. Now let me be honest with you about what this pit will do and, just as important, what it will not do. Because a man who only sells you the bright side is not being straight. This is not a tropical rainforest, and it will not make one. You are not going to grow bananas in a pit in Michigan without adding heat, and adding heat throws away the whole point. What you have built is a cool, damp, protected space that stays above the killing freeze. So be realistic about the harvest. The goal in the dead of January is not a great rush of growth. The goal is survival and a big head start on spring. You are keeping things alive and idling that would be dead in the open ground, so that when the light comes back in February and March, they leap ahead of everything your neighbors are only just planting. The undisputed king of this pit, for me, is the fig tree. Figs are tough, and they want to go dormant and sleep through winter anyway. In an open garden, a hard winter kills a fig clear back to the ground, and it spends the whole next summer just regrowing its wood instead of making fruit. But down in the pit, the roots stay cozy in that 50-degree soil, and the branches never see the killing frost. They will look like dead sticks in December. And then while the snow is still piled high outside, come February those buds will break, and by the time your neighbors are planting peas, you will have a fig with a full canopy and fruit already setting. Citrus is the other one that thrives down there, the tougher kinds, a Meyer lemon or a kumquat. Unlike the fig, they keep their leaves through winter. So they need that light we fought so hard to capture with the angled glass. They will sit down there green and patient while the world above is gray, hardly growing at all in the darkest weeks, just holding their fruit and idling until the days stretch back out. And greens, your kale and your spinach and your hardy lettuces will hold through the whole winter down there and give you salad in January. And here is the biggest mistake folks make once the plants are in the ground. So mark it, they drown them. You have to remember that down in a covered pit, there is almost no evaporation. The wind is not drying the soil, and the hot sun is not baking it. So if you water on a summer schedule, you will rot the roots inside of a month. I check the soil by hand. I push my finger down a few inches, and if it feels even a little cool and moist, I walk away. In the depth of winter, I might water once every 6 weeks, and no more. You want the soil living and spongy, not a swamp. It is a slow, quiet place, and your care has to match its pace. You do less, and you watch more. Now, I want to turn a corner with you and talk about why hardly anybody ever told you about this, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. There is a great deal of money in selling a man a heated greenhouse. There is good money in the $8,000 glass house, and better money still in the propane tank you have to fill to keep it warm, and steady money forever in the electric bill that runs the heaters and the fans month after month, winter after winter. That is a fine business. It comes back to you every year with its handout. Now, but there is no money at all, none, in telling a man to dig a hole in his own dirt and lay a scavenged glass door on top of it. There is no monthly bill in a pit. There is no tank to fill and no part to replace and no service call to schedule. A hole in the ground is the single worst product a company could ever imagine because it works and it keeps on working and it never once asks anybody for another dollar. So the simple old method sits quiet in farmyards like mine, and the loud expensive one is the one you see on every catalog and every store shelf. Now, I am not going to stand here in my field and tell you there is a room full of men somewhere plotting to keep the pit greenhouse a secret from you. It is not that. It is worse than that, in a way, and stranger. Nobody had to arrange it at all. No one had to sit down at a table and decide to bury the old way. It is just that the bright, expensive greenhouse had money behind it to advertise, and the plain dirt hole had none. One of them could afford to put its picture in front of your eyes 10,000 times, and the other one could only sit quiet in the corner of an old farm and wait for somebody curious to come along and ask. That is not a conspiracy. It is just who has a reason to teach you a thing and who does not. The folks who profit from your dependence were never going to be the ones to hand you your independence. That was always going to have to come from somebody with nothing to sell you. And that is exactly what I am, a farmer with a shovel and no catalog. Let me give you the honest math on it, plain, so it is not just talk. A heated hobby, greenhouse, bought and set up, runs you anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000, and then the propane and the electric to heat it through a northern winter runs you somewhere between $500 and $1,000 every single year. Call it $700 a year to be fair. The pit costs you $30 for the glass, or $70 if you buy the polycarbonate new, one time and just about nothing after that, because the sun and the earth do the heating for free. So over 10 years, the heated greenhouse has taken maybe $7,000 out of your pocket in fuel alone, on top of what it costs to buy. The pit has taken $30. That is somewhere between $6,000 and $9,000 kept in your own pocket over 10 years for the same fresh fruit in January. And that is not really about being cheap. I want to be clear on that. It is about being free. A thing you have to feed money to every winter is a thing that owns a little piece of you. A thing you dug once and never pay again is a thing you own clean and clear. That freedom is worth more than the money. So, here is what I want you to do this week. You do not need to dig up your whole backyard, and you do not need to rent an excavator or buy a truckload of lumber. I want you to start small. One little test pit, so you can see the thing work with your own eyes before you commit your back to a big one. First, this week, walk your yard at noon and find the spot that gets the best southern light. The place the winter sun hits longest and the buildings and trees do not shade. Second, keep your eyes open for the glass. Check the Habitat resale store. Watch the curb on trash day. Ask around for an old sliding door or a storm window somebody is tossing. Third, when you have your glass and a free afternoon, dig one small test pit, maybe 4 feet by 4 feet. Dig it a good 3 or 4 feet deep. Pile the dirt on the north side, do your water drainage test in the bottom, and lay that old window over the top on a south-facing tilt. Fourth, plant one hardy thing, a fig or a Meyer lemon or just a flat of kale. Cover it warm at night and then watch. Watch how the temperature holds. Watch how the snow slides off the glass. If it works, and it will, you can dig a bigger one next year. But for now, this week, just find your spot and pick up a shovel. And then I want you to come back here and tell me what you saw down in that pit on a cold morning, because I read every single comment, every one, And while you are down there in the comments, do me a kindness and tell me two things. Tell me what county you farm or garden in, so I know how cold your winters run and what will grow in your pit. And tell me how old your house is, because the older places were so often built by folks who knew these earth tricks by heart, and sometimes the answer is already sitting in your own root cellar. And if your grandmother or your grandfather had an old way of keeping green things alive through the winter, a cold frame or a root pit or a trick with the manure pile, share it down there too, because those little inherited methods are exactly the kind of knowledge that disappears forever when nobody writes it down, and the comments under this video are how we save them. The natural next step. After today, the thing I want to show you next time is the old way my people keep a root cellar. So a barrel of potatoes and carrots and apples stays firm and sweet all the way to spring without a lick of electricity. Because once you have learned to grow through the winter, the next thing to learn is how to keep what you grew. That is the natural next step after this one, so watch for it. Until then, the Lord bless you and keep you, and I will see you next time if we are spared and willing.